Hello, my name's Ian Hawkins. You're listening to The Y Word, the programme that gets under the skin of people who have changed the world and tries to find out why they do what they do. Coming up on the show, you're going to hear this.
Apparently, I have this tendency, I did it with Pink Floyd, well, with David Gilmour, where I think I'm absolutely terrified and cowering, and apparently I'm not. But outside, I'm being incredibly cocky and assured. To me, I've always sounded like an imposter on that record. When I hear that record, because it's this billion-dollar production. I mean, it is the poshest sounding thing you've ever heard. You know, it makes a Trevor Horn record sound like the Ramones. I mean, it's... The thing is that my dad gave me my first bass guitar, and it's the last thing he ever gave me. He then died. And it's only, of course, now the fullest time. You go, well, of course you're going to try and, honour your father. So, which is probably, I probably should have done. If my dad was still around, I probably would have stayed at school, gone to drama college or gone to college, done a million other things. But
a quick content warning. There are one or two swears, and there is a little bit of talk of heavy drinking and drug use. So if you don't want to hear that, you better skip to another episode. There's plenty up there on anchor.fm/The Y Word. Or you can check out our YouTube channel, or just go back to Stitcher, Overcast, Apple Podcasts, wherever you found this, and seek out another episode. As you'll hear, I joined our guest at his kitchen table in his lovely home overlooking the sea on the south coast. Today's guest on The Y Word is almost certainly already in your record collection, having supplied bass lines to tracks by Madonna, Michael Jackson, Pink Floyd, and Kirsty MacColl. Most recently, he's been on tour with Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets, but coronavirus has put him into lockdown and put that tour on ice, leaving me free to swoop in like a vulture and corner him. Guy Pratt, welcome to The Y Word.
Oh, good to be here. Well, good in my kitchen.
It's your kitchen.
Yeah, which is where 80% of the last 6 months has been.
You've been teaching people how to do your bass lines. What does it bring to a piece of music?
What bass guitar does, or any type of bass, is it essentially provides the link between the melody and the harmony. And apparently, I was just reading some report by some scientific journal that it's way more important to people than they think. You're actually connected to a piece of music a lot more by the bass than what you're hearing. In that it really is. Because I've always had the thing, well, the bass is the link between the melody and the rhythm. But that's actually just something I've said and makes sense. But it's interesting to know that actually on a neurological level, that is what it does.
I notice the bass a lot more when it's live than I do when it's...
That's because it's louder. 9 times out of 10, the bass is louder. Also, the thing is, we've just got this live album coming out of the Sources Live at the Roundhouse. And it's fantastic, and it sounds fantastic, and it's fantastically mixed. But to me, it doesn't sound like us because, and this isn't some bass player bitterness, because the bass is perfectly loud on it, but at our gigs, the bass is louder. And that, to me, fundamentally, where the bass is, fundamentally changes what the sound of a band. I mean, it's an interesting thing. All bass players moan about not being loud enough. And the thing is, they do usually have a point, because the bass is something that you really can put quite loud before it really gets in the way of anything else. And the problem with live sound is all live sound engineers seem to have this obsession with the bass drum. It's like everything starts with the bass drum, everything's about the bass drum. And it's like, you know what? It isn't. If you're Earth, Wind and Fire or Chic, then yes, it is. But if you're Elvis Costello, then you really don't need a bass drum that's louder than his vocal.
I'm interested in the difference between what happens with the bass in a live setting and what happens in the studio. Because I imagine, and I might be wrong on this, I imagine that a Pink Floyd track is put together by tiny little bits that are all woven together, and it all happens in the studio. Whereas you've got to do it, the challenge is then to do it live. Is that how it works, or is it?
Yeah, pretty much. Because but that's the interesting thing with Sources, because we're doing the early Pink Floyd where everything was about improvisation and sort of making up on the hoof. And it was a pop group, essentially. Whereas when I first started playing with Pink Floyd, that's why I'm very embarrassed by a lot of the stuff I did, because I kept trying to throw personality in and show off. I was young, it was the 80s, hey, what you going to do? And whereas now, for instance, my last few tours with David Gilmour, I'm much more for me, the fun is in being as accurate as I can, or at least playing stuff that sounds like it always could have been there. But that's the difference between albums and live albums. The funny thing is, if you listen to a band, listen to a song by a band at the beginning of a tour, and then listen to them at the end of the tour, it'll be completely different. And the thing is, but you don't notice that happening. It's not like you've consciously changed stuff. It's just like one night you do something, you go, oh, that's quite nice. And then the next night it goes in, that's quite nice. And the other funny thing is all sorts of horrible stuff stays in as well, because you forget everything. Every night there'll be something you go, oh shit, I really should tell them not to do that, or oh damn, I really shouldn't do that. But of course, by the end of the show, with all the adrenaline and everything, you've forgotten, so it never gets addressed. I remember once watching the first rough cut of Pulse, the Pink Floyd thing, with David Gilmour round at his house. And there was some little bass lick came up in a song. David went, oh yeah, I always hated when you did that. Why didn't you tell me?
Well, hold on.
And it's obviously because he forgot. You
Guy,
just forget.
Why didn't he tell you? He's the producer on that album. Why didn't he take it out?
Well, that's true, because they actually did end up taking a lot of stuff out in the later years.
Well, it's the first rule of editing, isn't it? It's to kill the thing you love, first and foremost.
Well, it's the first rule of everything, isn't it? Like writing. I remember, writing a musical with Gary Kemp. We wrote 2 musicals, and that was the thing of, it's almost like your favourite song is the one that has to go. And it's almost like deliberate, it's almost inspired.
I tend to think of us as being about the same age, but that means that you must have joined Pink Floyd when you were about 9. So, but clearly not.
Feels like that. No, I was 25.
25.
I was 25. But they were all in their early 40s then. Right. And they were the first people who'd ever been that old in rock and roll.
Right.
That's the funny thing now is I'm from kind of like the first generation of people who knew what getting older in the music business could be like. Because you always think for that 60s generation of bands, they had no idea. Yeah. They had no idea what they were going to do. I remember Mick Jagger turning 30 when I was at school, and all the papers were like, will he retire?
I want to find out.
I was like, do you take a mortgage out? Can you book holidays? What do you do when you're in a band?
As a 25-year-old coming to this very established band, what were you trying to do? You trying to impress or trying to put your stamp on it, or were you trying to...
I had to... When I first turned up in Toronto, when we flew with the first rehearsals we did, and this was a scale that it was unimaginable. We were rehearsing in a 747 maintenance hangar at the airport, which had so we had to clear security every day. And we basically had to go through customs, and it was all part of some taxing. So none of our equipment ever actually entered the country. We were in this weird no man's land. Probably could have murdered people, and it was so vast. But I had these 2 absolutely conflicting emotions. One of which was, you're getting sent home. There is no way you're doing this. You're absolutely getting sent home. You're not up. What were you thinking? What were you thinking? You can't play bass with Pink Floyd. That's absurd. It's like you're going to get put in your box. They're going to send you home. And at the same time, on a personal level, just meeting David and Rick and Nick, this feels like home. This feels like where I want to live in terms of people. People and their tastes and their loves, and it really felt like home. So I just wanted to, be in this world, not the glitz and the money. So literally just the conversation and the ideas and that all felt so in sync with where I wanted to be. But then at the same time, I was like, no, but you're getting sent home.
It's what we call imposter syndrome now, but in the 80s we just called.
Yeah, I don't know. But I've always suffered from terrible imposter syndrome, especially in the period after that first Pink Floyd tour, where I had my sort of 2 golden years in LA, where I became this sort of number 1 first call session cat. When I was doing Madonna and Robbie Robertson, and I was playing on everything, and I just thought, why? I mean, I love it. Yes, it was fantastic. But it was not what I signed up for, and it's certainly not what I'm actually qualified for at all.
Well, that does beg the question: what are you qualified for?
Well, yeah, I think that's I don't. I mean, the thing I've learned, since social media and everything, that's actually done a lot to assuage my imposter syndrome. Literally, just in the last few years, because you realise that it doesn't really matter what I think I am, because what I've done has inspired and brought joy to many people for many years, and you sort of think, well, essentially I've been a force for good in the world.
Yeah.
Because I'm this weird sort of half guy in a band, half muso hybrid, in that I was always very worried about what I was wearing. I've always loved the whole pop culture element of pop. It's like the trousers are as important, and the politics are as important as the music to me, always have been. And so what's really nice to say that I think that obviously has spoken to a lot of people who kind of look at the sort of great musicians and think, well, I can't be that. And then they look at pop stars and think, well, I don't want to be that. And then they look at me and go, well, yeah, that's kind of... he seems to have fun.
Achievable.
Yeah, but also plays, it's... well, the thing I like, yeah, it's achievable. And it's... that's the thing I like with my lockdown licks. So the funny thing is on practically every one I go, but with the exception of Like a Prayer, what's so nice is I always get to say, do you know, the one thing I've learned from, because half these songs I haven't played for 30 years, and it's like I've gone back and I was thinking, oh God, how am I going to do this? And realised, do you know, it's really not that difficult. None of my stuff's really that difficult, but it's actually, what's cool is it sounds like it's quite flash, but it really isn't.
The thing is, Guy, it's only 4 strings, so it's only 2/3 as hard as a guitar could be.
But that's not how it works, mate.
No?
No, that's not how it works. Well, that is the thing about the bass guitar, is that it is possible. The one thing that I will say the bass more than other instruments is it is possible to get away with it with less knowledge and less practice than any other instrument. There is an absolute bare minimum where, like with the drums, it's. But if you haven't you can either learn the drums or you've got an innate sense of time and stuff. In which case, yeah. But I don't think there's anything where you could. But yes, you can get away with it. But I think it's harder to be a good bass player than it's to be an okay bass player. Just a meat and 2-veg bass player is very, very simple. To be a good bass player, I think, is very, very difficult.
There you are. You're in LA. You've got these 2 golden years.
It started. I mean, it was nuts. I finished the 13-month Pink Floyd tour. I was just in a mess. I was sort of just drinking drugs and I bought this horrible little flat. I didn't go on holiday. I had no concept of holidays. I didn't take care of myself at all. And then I got asked to go and play on this Madonna record, on Like a Prayer, which was just amazing. And then because of that, I was developing a relationship with Pat Leonard, the producer and writer, who I knew before Pink Floyd. I knew through Brian Ferry. And he had this dream that he wanted to put a band together and do his own thing. And he just built on me, because you can imagine, he'd written and produced all of the True Blue album and all of the Like a Prayer album, right? Mm-hmm. So he was minted at the time. And so he built this insane, beautiful studio. And of course, he was just the golden boy at Warner Brothers. He just walked in and said, I want to do an album. They were like, whatever you want, mate. Just whatever you want. Just hit. And it was so... So I went over in February of '89 to do that with him, and this was the Toy Matinee project, which still to this day gets me more kudos with American musicians than anything I've done. Mm. No one's heard of it over here, and it's what led into the whole Tuesday Night Music Club. It's where Sheryl Crow comes from. Okay. And but I literally had to. That was 3 months working on that, doing all sorts of little sessions for Pat in between, and then. Literally, actually, before I'm not on the last song, because just before they finished the album, I had to fly back to London for 1 day's rehearsal, then straight off the European tour with Pink Floyd, where we went to Moscow, Soviet Moscow as it was then, and did the legendary Venice gig. I then literally flew straight back to LA the day from Marseille, the last show of the tour, and did 2 months on the Robbie Robertson album. In the middle of which I did Earth Song for Michael Jackson and various other sessions for people. I mean, it was nuts. And then from that, I came home. And then I didn't really do anything for ages. It's funny. That's the funny. I mean, I have had a lot of time of just not doing anything.
Is she who's in charge then? Have you got this producer who's running the show?
Well, Pat and her had a very, very good, very, very feisty relationship. It was great, but. I did in the same way as I did this. Apparently I had this tendency. I did it with Pink Floyd, well, with David Gilmour, where I think I'm absolutely terrified and cowering, and apparently I'm not. That's not actually what my behaviour is. Even though inside I'm thinking, oh, fuck, I can't do it like this. But outside I'm being incredibly cocky and assured, and that was the thing I noticed with Madonna, like, because my first day in the studio with her, and she's got everyone going, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, 3 blacks, 4 ma'am, no. And so I realised you have to plant a flag really quickly. And I don't know what I said, and you had to plant a flag, and then she respected that.
And Michael Jackson. I've just let's talk Michael Jackson.
I never met him. He was hiding behind the mixing desk once, and most of the time he just wasn't there. And that didn't really. I mean, because and I also get that to me. I've always sounded like an imposter on that record. When I hear that record, because it's this $1 billion production. I mean, it's the poshest sounding thing you've ever heard. You know, it makes a Trevor Horn record sound like the Ramones. I mean, it's now I like it. It used to be to me. I just sound like this kind of crass punk rocker, but the way the analogy I quite like in a way, it's like this beautiful glitzy sort of dinner or sort of cocktail party at like the swankiest hotel, right? At the George Sank in Paris or whatever, and then suddenly some drunk comes, it's like Ollie Reed or Keith Moon comes crashing in. You're like, oh fuck, what the fuck is this? And it's just what the party needed.
Right. It speaks to a sort of. There doesn't seem to be any one way to make a record, does there? It depends if you're.
There isn't. There are, and now because I don't come from a conventional record making background, especially as a bass player, because the whole, the perceived wisdom is that a rhythm section either the whole band go into the studio, or certainly the drums and bass go in together and they lay down the rhythm track. And everything. And I hate working like that. I love working with a drummer, but obviously the first thing is that bass sounds shit on headphones, and you just don't have any weight. And because all my formative years it was the 80s, it was the 80s machine, and the whole thing is that the bass guitar really lent itself to all the new technology. That's when I had a Steinberg, which was this little carbon graphite stick of a bass, and so all my formative recording was actually done sitting in a control room. Usually just with the artist and the producer, or even just the producer. And then lots of people like to work in more, traditional ways. But so there is no set way at all. I mean, if you're a band, I guess you work like a band. That's what always surprised me, for instance, working with Trevor Horn, what he likes as a band in a room, which you would never think. You would think it's painstakingly bit by bit, sort of mosaic, presume. But he's actually an old school band player. I'm very lucky in that most of the people I work with, most of the stuff I do is stuff I love. I mean, if you're doing a session, one of the things I love about it is it can be something you don't even really like, you don't care about it, but you go into someone's studio and there's an artist and you're bringing something to their song and you're making their day and you're giving them something they wouldn't have had before. And that's a really great way to spend an afternoon. Really, it's a nice thing to do. But then...
I'm just interested as well in when the whole digital thing came in, because digital now is marvellous. I can sit there with GarageBand and create a good approximation of the band on my phone.
Well, it's funny because when that all started, I was in the night back when because I kind of, after that last Floyd tour, after the '94 tour, I decided that's when I was sort of settling down, getting married, and I kind of thought and I was very much into writing then, songwriting and everything, and I thought I'll be a composer, I'll be a TV film composer, and so I started doing that, and I did really well in it, and I loved it. And that was when everything was changing from, first you had these digital tape machines, the ADATs, and then slowly the computer got more and more. And then I had early Logic, which is the software music. But back then, you had to pay fortunes on these Pro Tools hardware things, and then CDs came. Then you could do your own CDs. That became a thing.
Yes.
And then everything. The one thing I find interesting is the thing that is mastering, because mastering is still there. And still, my son has just put out his first record, and he found someone online who does mastering and sent it off, and it really made a difference. At every stage of making a record, everyone's trying to cut deals. It's like, can we do a deal with the studio? Can we do it? And then it's like, of course, with me, it's like, Guy, will you do us a deal on this? You go, yeah, all right, then. Can someone do a deal? Do a deal to mastering, get to mastering. Hi, we charge this much. Fine. No one ever questions the mastering. It's like, no one ever negotiates with masters. It's fine. It's like, this is untouchable kind of.
So if you're trying to make a living in the music industry,
people ask me this, that, and I feel really bad. I have young musicians asking me,
go for mastering.
Yes, if I say go to mastering, because young musicians say, "What do you do?" I say, "I don't know. I don't know how it works now." If I was 18 now, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be a musician.
What would you do?
I don't know. It's what it because I think the same can be said of any art form. There's always one area where the cool people with ideas are. And when I was young, that was music. And I don't know if that is now. Then I think that's one of the reasons I really wanted to get into comedy, because around, from the 90s onwards, that seemed to be where the cool people with ideas were.
Well, it was called the comedy is the new rock and roll.
Yeah.
I was like, but Guy, you're the old rock and roll. What's wrong with you?
Yes, I'm comedy and the new rock and roll and the old rock and roll.
As you can hear, Guy's career has had highs and lows. Some of those highs have been status and money, and some of them have been chemical. He's also done comedy as well. So he's done this interesting thing of straddling two worlds. And I wanted to find out a little bit more about how he managed both of those. And also, my music chums tend to be pretty monosyllabic, really, because they do all their talking through their music. So what is it that makes him so, chatty? So what I find fascinating about you, Guy, is that you are one of the few musicians I know that is both a really good musician and can talk. Because most of the musicians I know who are intuitive, if you get them into a conversation, or you ask them about a piece of music they've made, they kind of go, well, listen to the track, I've just told you, I've just said everything I need to say. Where does your...
I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. The interesting thing is, that's probably why I did the comedy, because the one thing I've heard of is that with my character and personalities, was why on earth would you be a bass player? So because it's actually, because it's the other side of me, because being a bass player is all about being in service. So other people, it's all about making a whole. It's not look at me, it's look at us. It's if you're being a dick, you're making everyone look a dick. If you're being cool, then no one's really noticing you, but you're making the thing work. And I guess that's it's almost like it's the sort of thing that's like a wise man told me to do rather than me wanting to do it myself. And the bass that I now realise with the fullness of time, the main reason is that my dad gave me my first bass guitar, and it's the last thing he ever gave me. He then died. And it's only caused now the fullness of time. You go, well, of course you were going to try and, honour your father. So, which is probably, I probably should have done. If my dad was still around, I probably would have stayed at school, got a drama college or gone to college, done a million other things. But in fact, Gala, my ex-wife, she always, because I've always had this thing of maybe I should have been an actor, which is about, she had this very funny thing, which is pretty very true. She said, yeah, but if you're an actor, you probably would have been an actor. The good thing about you picking the bass is it's the one thing where you had a shot at a world ranking. It's true, I do scrape into the bottom of those top 50s sometimes.
And so was it not odd to be playing a stadium with Pink Floyd one day? And
it was great ego. The thing that's so funny is that because I had to play bass and guitar at my shows, and I'd be hauling my own amps and all. And the funny thing was, when I was doing the two in parallel, there were times where I was on tour with David Gilmour, and I'd be sort of doing little comedy shows the night off. When I first did the Edinburgh Festival, what was brilliant was that so many comedians are musicians, and usually they're people who tried music and then ended up doing comedy. I was fantastically accepted by everyone, and I was in awe of half these comedians. So that was brilliant. I made a good living out of the comedy for about 5 years. It was basically what I did for a living, and because the irony is, for instance, you make more money slogging around playing little arts centres than you would, say, being on tour with Brian Ferry.
Did you find, they are great stories, and I've seen the show and I enjoyed it. They're great stories. Do you feel that as time has passed and we've maybe looked back at some of these people that you've worked with and our opinion of them has changed and shifted, do you feel that some of those stories are a bit, they're a bit nuanced?
Yes.
The way they didn't used to be.
Absolutely, yeah. And they are for me, especially, since I stopped drinking, you sort of think, but I did become aware when I realised that what I was doing was a sort of custodian role, in that I read what my job was almost historical. I'm talking about a world that's gone.
with the history that certainly people of my age, right? The history I know is not 1066 and the Magna Carta. It's the Ricky Tick Club. It's Eel Pie Island. It's Cyril Davis. It's Alexis Corner. It's Long John Baldry. It's like, and if I have to read that fucking stuff one more time, like, I know that shit inside out. Alexis, George Gromelski, Peter Meaden, Lou Golden, and every iteration, because everything came from this little blues scene. And anyway, so I had to know that, and you had to know a bit of Chicago blues, and you had to know about Motown, and you had to know about. Whereas if you're a young musician now, there's 70 years of history, and you're supposed to know everything. But then you're supposed to know everything about Hendrix and everything about Joy Division.
But maybe not, because I mean, going back a few years, the chart was really important, and now there's a million charts because there's a million different genres, and everybody seems to bubble up into their own genre.
Yeah, that's true. The genre thing always made me laugh, especially with dance music. But also, it's the same thing, but it's always been like that. It's like the thing with R&B. It's like everything was just a 12 bar as far as I could see. It was either done by white people or black people, but it's something, no, he was the first person to play this jump skiffle. It's like, I can't really see the difference. And in the same way as dance music got like that in the 90s, it's like you sort of move one hi-hat. No, that's an intelligent small beat.
Are you going to go back into comedy?
I don't know. I'd like to. Like I said, because there's so much Pavlovian stuff to do with drinking involved. There are so many comedians who stop drinking who actually all come back better. Because I am trying to write another book. So one thing that's happening in lockdown is actually because my book's done really well, and I've had so many comments and stuff. People say, "Please, when's the next book coming?" So. If I had another book, then yes, I would do the comedy. I think I would, but it would need to be. It would have to be all new stories. I can't keep telling those stories. But there's also, I think it would be a different, gentler kind of comedy because I haven't got the whiz bang stories anymore.
It's a difficult second album, Guy.
It is difficult. It's very much that.
Yeah, there's two sorts.
Difficult second album. I'm nearly fucking 60, man. That's quite late.
There's two sorts of comedians, though. There's the comedians that don't drink, and there's the comedians that shouldn't drink. And what has happened is you've moved from one to
the other. That's true. That's true. Yeah, no, I mean, because that's the funny thing, because if there's one thing, when drinking does not make you funnier, but it just makes you louder and more confident.
Yes.
So,
and it turns out that you can get those by just being better.
Yeah. Well, if there's one thing I've learned over the last couple of years is that dinners, you go out for dinner. It gets louder. It gets more raucous. The energy is produced by the table, not by people getting drunk. It all still happens.
I've had a falling out with somebody on Twitter, which happens quite often. I do go back and say, if we were face to face, this wouldn't be an argument.
No, but I think how I get with people on Twitter is I enjoyed my 2 days off.
It's been bliss, hasn't it?
Yeah, I loved it. But the quite funny thing is, instead I've been looking at Parlour, which is fucking hilarious. The absolute cesspit, and they're just eating each other already. I mean, it's just brilliant. It's like Bizarro World, more defending Trump's press conference.
I thought the left wing was supposed to be the ones that ate each other. Is it happening on the right as well?
It's happening on the right. Well, my favourite was when Katie Hopkins laid into Darren Grimes for not standing next to his Starkey comments. I thought, this is just brilliant.
My final question, which is, you can have lunch with anybody you like in order to further your career. Now, you've probably furthered your career as a bass player, but what about the comedy? So they can be alive, they can be dead, they can be fictional.
Am I having lunch with them now, or is it an earlier time?
Well, if they are on the grounds that they could be fictional or dead, this is the thing. You could say, you could say Tony Hancock 1956.
But do you know what? Tony Hancock was one of the names that was absolutely on the tip of my tongue.
Right, okay. But 1956, not 1966.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, in fact, no, do you know who it would be? It would be Ray Goldman and Alan Simpson.
And why particularly would you?
Because they're the two greatest comedy writers who were and it's so interesting when you hear them talk how they were actually so fantastically zeitgeist. And what's so profound about a lot of the Hancock stuff, especially like the Bedsitter and stuff, is they were so attuned to the human condition and the fact that, and I remember an interview with them saying that it was at that time because my dad was kind of part of that scene a bit, but everyone was trying to best themselves a bit. It was just before the 60s, and everyone was reading Bertrand Russell and Nietzsche, and we were on the verge of psychedelics.
And he is trapped. He is stuck. In a similar way to
Ian Hawkins, who's a good friend of mine, right? He said he summed it up brilliantly. He said the swinging 60s. That's when we first. He said the swinging 60s was 300 people. So we weren't in that 300.
Okay, you can. I just feel like it's like this. You can take Tony Hancock 1956 with you. Guy Pratt, thank you very much for coming on the Y Word.
Oh no, it's been an absolute delight, I must say. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the tea. And it was an absolutely blinding cup of tea. Thanks so much to Guy Pratt for being a really fun guest, but also giving us so much, that look behind the scenes of the music business, talking about imposter syndrome. Also, this idea of finding a new career, a new way of making money when you've maybe of an age where you shouldn't be looking to do new things, and just having the bravery to go out and do it and reaping the rewards. If you enjoyed today's show, there's lots more in the archive. Go and have a look through. There's bound to be something there that tickles your fancy as well. I really appreciate it when people leave reviews, leave comments, get in touch with me on LinkedIn. That's kind of where I hang out. Hit the subscribe button, share with your friends, all that kind of thing. It's really helpful, it gets us the numbers, and that means that I get to do more interviews like this and talk to more absolutely amazing people. You've been listening to The Y Word. My name's Ian Hawkins. Have a great time. Till the next time.